in another real case, where they really knew who the actual culprit was, they brought in witnesses, and I think they gave some hints to an extent. It was someone else. They give some sort of a point to say it is that guy, not this guy, not the real guy. And every witnesses.
And then due to the stimuli that they were exposed to, they then had a.
They really thought. Exactly. They really thought it was him. I appreciate that. By all means, I'm not denying such behavior. Absolutely. But bear in mind this. For example, I could see you today, go home, and then see some other person much like you. Of course, I've seen you only for maybe half an hour today, much like you, and I could, that guy, was it not? Yeah, that's in mathematics we use the discrete mathematics and continuous mathematics. Continuous. These are continuous continuums. Yeah. So if you had chin like that, if someone else had chin like that, I wouldn't be able to make much distinction of that. Yeah, unless I've seen you for many years, and then I suddenly see you a bit bulky and I think, put on weight and so on. Of course, in those areas you could make mistakes. But having a specific plan for a house is a discrete detail. Discrete detail. Having the stairs in a specific place, going like that and then going up like that, and running up that, playing by running up that when on the day when they were constructing that. Those are not continuums. Those are discrete details. That's what I earlier called specific details. Not I can see dogs come in, I can see all sorts of things come in, which are part of my continuum, like my experience. But here I'm talking about specific. Or in mathematics we use the term discrete intervention. Discrete mathematics, discrete interventions. They don't correspond to a pattern beforehand and so on. So yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So I agreed with your idea of such behavior, but I do not agree that my experience is part of that behavior. That's number one. Point number one. Point number two. It is true if I made decisions purely based on that one dream. Yes, maybe you can still question me. The point.
It's called a ladder. The start of many small incidents that will then later accumulate to the point.
Small incidents. Small in terms of course you didn't see. It was just me who saw it and so on. But big in terms of the level of detail I was seeing. Big details I was seeing, many such experiences in my life put together. It was let's say a cumulative case for me. But it doesn't stop there. That's my point. If I had only that, like I said earlier, like I confessed to you earlier, I can legitimately call that hallucination. Legitimately call that hallucination. That's where my point is. That's where the other stream also, independent, historical evaluation comes in. And this has its own solid base to it, by the way. I don't even have to give you my experience. Very seldom do I talk about my experience in the park. Very seldom do I communicate. I think maybe in the last 10 years, only to maybe 5 people I've told my personal experiences. But beyond that, I stick to the Bible, I stick to historicity of the Bible, historicity of Jesus and so on. Point is this, that in itself is a rock solid case. Add to that the second stream I have for my personal use, for user. Both of them together make my case for me rock solid. But what I am commending before you is this to you. And if you were to take me, I don't know if we may meet again. I don't know if you get to know about how trustworthy I am and so on. Of course, if you get to know those things, my personal testimonies would also be a valid input in your life, where you may know, Arul, I know him through this, through that. I don't think he normally lies. Of course, he may lie here and there. But broadly speaking, he is well-intentioned. He communicates things only which he knows. If we get a chance where you can evaluate that also, then my communication to you would also act as a legitimate input to you. My experiences would much like how a very close friend to you could tell you, well, I saw this dream or whatever, and you wouldn't take him to be a liar immediately or whatever else. You take that at some level, even if you give it a very low mark or low weightage, they still take it. The point is that both together is my solid case. For you, I'm commending the historicity of Jesus, the historicity of his scriptures to you. as subjective witnesses. And my personal commendation to you is purely me as a fellow human being saying, you may want to explore it. Do not stick around just being an agnostic for the sake of being an agnostic, because being an agnostic for a long time doesn't even do enough credit to you being a consultant.
How do you, just out of interest, how do you define an agnostic? How do you define?
Pure definition, the term comes from Greek words, agnostic. Gnostic corresponds to the Greek word gnosis, knowledge, agnostic, agnosticism, pure Greek. If you go back to the pure Greek, purely says, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Now the point is, the point is, you can say I don't know now, but you have heard me speak, you have heard my testimony, you have heard this. About this, my challenge to you that this is historical, which I didn't venture out in detail today, but later on, God willing. But the point is, please try that out. Please explore the historicity of the Bible, the historicity of the Gospels, because your friend earlier, the other guy, he said, wasn't it him? I think it was him, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. He said that, wasn't it him who said NKJV was changed 5 times?
No.
Wasn't he the one who asked me to read from KJV?
Yeah, he asked you to quote something.
And he made a loose comment here there. He said, the New King James has been changed 5 times. And I was thinking, what 5 times does he have in mind?
Yeah.
Because no scholar would ever talk about things being changed 5 times, 10 times, and so on. So if he is making that loose statement, he doesn't know what he's talking about, is my point, purely. The point is this. You can evaluate for yourself the historicity. If we get a chance, God willing again, I can share with you some additional details for that also. But point is, you did not have knowledge. Now you have some information which you can process.
Can I talk? I've listened to both of you guys.
Yeah,
for like
please.
30 minutes. So I'm a doctor, a medical doctor, and I'm a Muslim. So I'll just background.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't know what you're saying. If you are agnostic, atheist, I don't really know. I'll just assume. I'll go on the presumption that it's agnostic.
Yeah.
So like, they say like. And in the Quran it says that our signs are in the world. You'll see our signs. God is saying that our signs are in the world. So Albert Einstein once said, he said, you can believe the world in 2 ways, that everything is a miracle or nothing is a miracle.
Yeah.
Right? So what I argue is that, you know, the Stonehenge, the stones that kind of stack, most people don't believe that it was haphazard. They say something must have done it in that manner, right? The same way, you know, the proteins, the amino acids that build a human body, this is just because it's microscopic and time continuum, you could say that this is the chances that this could happen is, you know, a potential to have, you know, there is a potential that it could happen by chance. Yeah, it could, yes, right? But even like known evolutionists, some of them say there's a famous Turkish evolutionist, I don't remember his name, he said that the chance of the human body to arise, or a human to arise in that manner that they say with these amino acids, if you know enough about the way the amino acids line up, they're left and right. He said it would be more likely that a monkey taps on a keyboard and he writes Romeo and Juliet, right? So in science they say 1 over 10 to the 50 or 10 to the 40, I can't remember off the top of my head, is considered so small the chance that it becomes 1 over infinity and it's negligible. So it's impossible, right? So, you know, you're not going to ever get a sign. In the Quran it says that, you know, the prophets say that the people want me to show them a sign, for example, like bring bring the angel down or bring God down or do something right in front of them. He says, if I show them that sign and they don't believe after this, then everything's over for them. They will be punished and destroyed. Yeah. So there's a point where you have to take somewhat of a leap of faith. You're never going to get the answer right, but you have to look at the overall evidence that you have and just make a leap of faith, so to speak. Yeah. So you're not going to get what you're hoping, assuming you're agnostic, and you're not going to be able to impress him with that, what you saw in your dream. It's not going to work for him.
That's what we're agreeing with, kind of.
Me and you are agreed, right?
Oh yeah, but we.
No, can I please?
Let me just.
You spoke for me there, which I don't want.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
He was trying to interpret what he heard us say.
What I'm trying to say is that what you say, your own internal and external, is not sufficient for somebody like that.
Absolutely, no, I never said that's what I'm commending to you. I didn't say that.
He's talking about how I've built up my logical decision of not believing in a set scripture.
What logical chain did you go through to believe in, to decide that there is no God?
I mean, I grew up in a Christian country. I mean, no, I don't necessarily know it's a Christian country. I mean, we were burning churches when I grew up, so you can take that with a pinch of salt. But relatively, I grew up in a Christian country, Norway. 90s. It was a messy time. That's not the point. Everything around me was, Protestant belief. So, you can say that it was quite moderate. It was more into the moral side of things, not necessarily the be-all, end-all aspect that an Orthodox might take. Let's put it that way. And for me, it was a matter of there is not enough evidence to suggest that I should take a step into being a believer and buying this, because I think there's too much to suggest that there are other questions that are posing issues that religion, Christianity as an example, just falls so short of that. That gap for me is so big.
No, one second.
No, Lentil, I was talking to you, sir. What do you have?
So when I say, as a Muslim, for example, people use all of Islam. This represents religion. Like, for example, you use carbon-14 dating to say that X, Y, and Z has been around for so long. The Bible says people have been around for 5,000 years. See, we don't, as Muslims, we don't believe that. There's a time is. So that's one thing that I have to explain. That's part one. This book that you adhere to, you're saying it hasn't changed. Is that true? Tell me about the canonization of the Bible. I just want
No. You don't pick and choose. You either want me to come in. You either want me to come in, or you don't want me to come in.
I do.
If you want me to come in, I want to come in certain things. Come in certain things.
Listen, in some ways, we're on the same side. So you're my brother in some ways.
No.
You're my brother in some ways.
We are fellow human beings.
But in some ways, you and I are the same.
In many ways. I'm not talking about purely some ways.
No, even
in many ways.
Theologically, we are, my friend.
In many ways, we are fellow human beings, and therefore we share plenty of things, and therefore we share the same, let's say, avenues. So I'm pretty happy with even calling you a friend, even though I don't know you in detail and so on. I'm quite happy in even making friends with you. So that's my mindset. Now, but with that in mind, I'd like to certainly and very clearly say a few things. One of the things. Just to clarify what you were trying to tell him earlier, I'm not commending my personal experiences for you to use them as your experience.
No, I'm here to ask, just get fascinated. Yeah, absolutely, I have such a different viewpoint.
But I'd like to certainly commend to you that God who spoke to me, who I personally know.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm not saying take that for yourself. Who I personally know is capable of speaking to you also in a manner which convinces you personally. I don't know what that manner is. For example, I told you about the dreams I saw. I told you about my experiences and so on. In the context that you live in, some of them may not work, some of them may work, and so on. But God knows the precise details. The God I serve knows the precise details of who you are, where you come from, what your mindset is, the context of your living, all sorts of similar things. And He knows the challenges you have mentally in terms of your experiences, your mental hurdles and so on. He knows all those things, and He can cross those hurdles to speak to you.
Can I just ask you? I have to leave. It's been good. You've been nice. But can I just ask one question? If we can keep the answers short, that'd be great. Are you happy that you came to London? As a pre-question, are you happy that you moved to London?
I'm happy that I'm with God. I'm in the thick of God's will.
You're happy here, right? You're happy moving to London and all that stuff. Would you credit your decision moving to London to God or to yourself?
Like I told you, Crystal.
Simple question.
Simple question. Answer. God wanted me to come. I obeyed. I came. Who should the credit go to? You decide. So if I told you this, you did not have any money. You wanted to buy a luxury car. You don't have any money. I'm your friend. I had plenty of money. I give you the money. You took the money, you paid for it, got the car. Who should you give the credit to?
As a question, the reason I'm asking is, as a non-believer or heathen, whatever you want to call me, one of the biggest things that I have a problem with as far as religion and the association to a deity up there is the idea of thanking God for things happening, right? We've got people. I'll get to it. That's what I'm saying. People surviving car crashes, thanking God, and winning the lottery or what this, that, and the other, thanking God. And one thing which really ticks me with that is you're taking away credit that you deserve yourself, that other people might deserve. You have people thanking God for vaccines. You don't thank God for vaccines, you thank all the scientists through history that's brought us to the point that we have these things. Well, it's like thanking God, like we're giving away so much credit that we need to fall to ourselves. I feel like religion is, for one, it's an easy excuse for a really big question. And I wish I had an answer to it. And that's partially, obviously, why I care about this. Because I want an answer.
Can I respond?
I'm not finished. When we take that credit, we take away the appreciation that we should show others, ourselves, the abilities that we have. Instead we hand off to some deity, thinking that there's been some sort of divine intervention. That's it. Do you see where I'm going?
I see where you're
That was
going.
just right. That was just right.
Can I please respond?
Please.
I think it would be presumptuous from your part to decide for others.
Yeah.
That's point number one. Point number two, let each individual in their own experience decide where credit goes to. They could be wrong, they could be right, but that's the good idea.
Yeah,
let them decide. Let them decide. Number one. Number two. Number three, in my case, in my personal experience, I never would tell you that God did everything. I did certain things. I mean, some of them were good, some of them were bad. I did all sorts. I mean, I polished my shoe a few days ago and so on. There are certain things I did. I'm not going to say God did that for me and so on. The point is this. There are, when you ask me about who did what in my life, I think it would be entirely good for you to, let's say, leave that judgment to me.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. Now, and this is one of the main problems I see with atheists. They go around saying, you believe in God because you want to feel happy.
Atheists are a nightmare to deal with. So
So people are thinking, wait a second, you think for yourself, let me think for myself, you think for yourself, speak just for yourself. Why do you put yourself in my mind? I mean, for example, in my speaking to you so far, did I ever put myself in your mind? Saying, oh, you might have done this. No, I asked you when I didn't know what you did in certain situations. I asked you. I asked, for example, in a meeting, what would you do? Is this good or is this bad? I asked you certain things.
He's making generalizations.
Yeah, the point is this. Speak for yourself, decide for yourself. Let me speak for myself. Point is this. In my personal experience, I wouldn't say vaccines came from God. I wouldn't say that.
we agree on that. That's good.
Well, I don't know if some Christians say that. Of course, I don't know. I don't know what all Christians say. No, but let's not. Of course, all sorts of people can say all sorts of things. There could be some errors in some of those things, some other non-erroneous statements. But let's stick to simple logic.
You see the point that
I don't see the point. My point is this. My point is this. As responding to your point, my point is this. You are saying you are upset. Of course, you didn't use the term upset, but you are unhappy with people not taking certain credit.
I think it's a good word to put it.
I mean, whichever word. We get the idea. You are not impressed with people not taking credit for certain things for which they should have ideally taken credit. So what I'm saying is let them decide for themselves in their personal lives. They know in their lives who should receive credit for what. You ask me, in terms of coming to the UK, whether it was a good decision or not, who should I thank? I gave you a precise explanation. God asked me to come. I obeyed and came. Who should take the credit?
And that's a fair point. But on the other hand, if let's say someone sees a patient, surviving cancer, comes out for some reason, has an interview at the hospital, say, it was God took the cancer away from me, and then you have someone else sitting somewhere with cancer and thinking, if I just pray, then clearly it works.
I heard you make that point.
Good thing.
My dear friend, I heard your point, that specific point earlier. I'm completely with you on that.
Okay.
Me personally, when it comes to miracles, healings especially, I personally prefer a miracle where there is no alternative explanation. In other words, I don't know if you were here when I mentioned this to you earlier. So he's a medical doctor. I have lived in this country for 10 years. I'm still not even registered with the NHS. I'm still not even registered with it. My personal opinion, by no means am I saying I won't go to any doctor. That's not what I'm saying. Like I said earlier, to you, I think my sister is an ophthalmologist, eye surgeon. My brother-in-law is a radiologist. He's a medical doctor who did further studies radiology. That's the background. I have amongst my close relatives, I have medical professionals, well qualified, and they're quite successful in their careers. But being in that context, my personal preference is, if for example if I fall sick, if I have medicine, and then if I recover, I wouldn't go around saying God recovered, God help me, as a testimony, as a sign. I wouldn't do that. But if I fell sick, and if the doctor said, this guy is terrible, he's going to die and so on, if I did not take any medicine, and if I recovered, against all evaluation by medical professionals, I would say, you guys don't know, God intervened, I came back alive, because I spoke to him, he answered, he brought me back to life. If that were the case, that's my personal preference. No confusion, no room for confusion is what I personally prefer. But that doesn't mean other people can't do other things. That's their judgment. Let them do what they want to. The challenge to you is, but that is not what we were talking about originally. Please take this challenge to you. You said you are from Norway, Christian country, and you said you had questions that you had to deal with. You had reasoning which essentially made you to think there is no God or whatever, or for which you didn't find enough evidence or whatever.
That there was something worth my time.
There, my precise commendation. If you consider a fellow human being's testimony as something worthwhile to pursue, my testimony to you is that Jesus is historical. The signs and wonders, miracles, things that the Gospels claim that Jesus did are historical. I'm of course asserting things are historical, and more crucially, the claims about Jesus, the fact that Jesus claimed certain things about himself are historical, and finally, the fact of his crucifixion, death, burial, and resurrection are also historical. Let me please comment those.
What's the point? What is the point you're making?
If Jesus did signs and wonders in an objective way in history, which we can trace back to and say, I can see that there are witness statements for these. I can see there are legitimate witnesses for these and so on.
Yeah.
If he claimed that he was supernatural in origin, and if he was able to prove that specific claim, ultimately through his death, burial, resurrection, that opens up an entire doorway for us into the supernatural.
So we're in that, by going with that, we're kind of assuming that there is a God.
No, let me finish. The logic I'm talking about.
What you're talking about is, let's say, the example that you took before, but let's say you had a disease, bad prognosis, all that stuff, whatever. Doctors gave you meds, you didn't take it, you were healed anyway. Would you then automatically jump to the conclusion that, wow, there's someone up there? Or would you then maybe stop around and think, what caused this? Is there something in my body that could, fight the disease? And from these questions, we have medicine,
both are possible answers. It depends on the situation.
Do you think both are possible answers?
Of course, yes. You as a consultant should know this much more than anyone else.
Miracles are possible.
No. When certain things happen, when we don't know how they happen, it is important for us to keep all options open for investigation. All options open.
Can you please? I'm asking this because I genuinely don't know.
No, I'm telling you because I genuinely do know. You know about decision trees in consultancy?
Can you name and explain the events of any actual miracle cures that have taken place?
My father was dead, he came back alive. He was dead, he was admitted to a hospital, a small hospital owned by a Christian medical doctor with a chapel. Within the boundary of the hospital there was a chapel. That was where he was admitted. He had secondary stage of cholera when he was admitted. Essentially he was dehydrated to an extent. The doctor essentially said he's going to die, you can just wait, watch him die. That's what the doctor said. And the recommendation he gave to my mother, I wasn't too old at that time, so doctor didn't speak to me. But mother, he essentially said, well, what do you want from him in the last few days? Just get those things done. I.e., inheritance of all sorts of things like that. Just make sure you speak to him about those things. He's going to die. That's the commendation by the medical doctor at at that point in time. And the background to that is, I mentioned to you earlier, my father was a persecuting atheist.
Yes.
As a maverick, just a few days before that, my father had, in my luxurious house, my father had taken every single Bible which was available, and the Bibles, I mean, we paid money which we did not have. I mean, it was very hard to find. Those things he took away, tore them into pieces, put them in the bin, public bin, and came back. And he essentially said, I am feeding you, you guys are saying God is feeding us, and so on. He got terribly upset, and he did all these maverick things. Finally, in the 2 doors that we had, one of those doors had a little sticker with the Bible verse. We used coconut back home, and he used a grater, a hand grater, for the coconut, and he scratched that away. Even though it's only two doors that we own, he didn't mind even scratching that. Few days earlier, these things happened, and then now he's admitted. On the way of taking him to the hospital, God spoke to my mother. God said, "Don't worry, he's not going to die." And then she takes him to the hospital in the middle of the night, and the doctor said he's going to die. Watch him die. My mother was, no, I don't think so. Whatever. My dad now was very feeble, dehydrated entirely, and he's essentially talking about, my wife, you know what, sorry about what I did. He was in government job at that time. When I die, you have the right to ask for the job that I had as a matter of government policy. Make sure you take that. Don't let anyone else in the corrupt Indian practice take away my job. Children, you do this. Can you please study this? Can you please do this? Accomplish these things. You can do all those things. Forgive me about what I did and all those things. He was settling his accounts before he was going. Ultimately, a few days later, our pastor came there, prayed for him, and after that, my dad testified. Before that, he had essentially passed out. And after that, my dad came back and he testified that he didn't know what was happening. It was blank. I mean, he doesn't even know what was happening. And he saw a light come in from the place where the pastor was praying for him. A light come in, and then he got his life back suddenly as a discreet intervention. And then my dad said, I feel much better. Medical doctor, Christian, supposedly Christian, was entirely unhappy because this guy did what he couldn't do. So he chased the pastor away. He essentially said he couldn't come here anymore, chased him away, and my father steadily recovered from there. And he is alive today. This is my personal testimony. I mean, because you asked me, do I know of any? I'm telling you. No, I'm not saying you should trust me in all that I'm saying, depending on what you think of who I am and so on. But the point is this. The most crucial point is this. Going back to what we were talking about. The historicity of Jesus. The historicity of miracles. You said there's some sense to it.
Miracles.
You said there is some sense to it, assuming there is a God. Yeah, you made a point about assuming God. Something like assuming God or whatever. My point is this: you don't have to assume anything. If you believe you are a human being, if you believe in fellow human beings, as a fellow human being in human history, Jesus did these things. You don't have to assume in the supernatural to approach that subject.
But so you believe in the